Alright, Coach Nefarious, and I'll be doing a live analysis of the Scrim game from the perspective of Sons of Capri Sun, playing on the red side. Alright, so let's get started. What's the compositions like? Obviously, you guys can tell just as well as I can, but let's go over it anyway. You got Nautilus versus Zorn in the top lane, slightly Ornn favored, I'd say, or maybe even quite heavily Ornn favored. You got Xin Zhao versus Rek'Sai in the jungle. I think that should be Rek'Sai favored just because of how strong Rek'Sai is, but prone to skill matchups in this elo, heavily favoring Xin Zhao. I would rather be a low elo Xin Zhao than a low elo Rek'Sai. And in the mid lane, we got Orianna versus Vladimir. Obviously, it's just poke mage versus scaling, sustain, you know, like that's just how it works. And in the bot lane, we have Caitlyn Karma, the ultimate poke siege disengage BS against the Ezreal and Lux from Little Cloud and Stronger over here. So, just that little bit of disruption, you know, poke disruption. Karma is more like utility, goes in both ways, engage or disengage a little bit, you know, speed someone else up. Lux is more of a one-way street, just control, just disrupt. Okay, well. Okay, so let's take a look. So, first of all, if we want to go for a level 2 gank, it's not going to be a lane gank like this, because lane ganking essentially happens on bounces, and bounces is, let's say you got a big minion wave stacked up over here, it's going to reach over here. It covers a lot of distance because there's such a big gap between the minion waves, right? That doesn't happen when the wave's in the center here, it just pushes a little bit, and you'd have to wait here for approximately 3 minutes, or 3.5 minutes before this reaches the brush. So that doesn't work. That definitely does not work. It's a little execution-based thing. It's not a strategy. Like, the strategy of level 2 chase ganking is very, very nice. I really like seeing that. Now we'll see the planned transition gank onto mid lane if it's possible. Otherwise, if Rek'Sai started blue, you'll have to essentially transition to mid lane anyway. If he started red buff, which he should, which he didn't, then you can invade his blue buff as well. But it is a mid lane gankable situation, so let's just go for it right now. There we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Boom. Boom. Flash, Q. Okay. That looks like a flash Q if ever I've seen one. This one is just a little bit of execution as well. Look at this, look at this, look at this. This is where you charge up the E. So the barrier comes out. Look at this. If you flash E here, you're gonna have time to channel the Q. You're gonna have time for that. Like, that's unfortunate. I can understand the hesitation there. Honestly, that would have been extremely clutch. So, yeah, not too disappointed in that play at all. Got the flash, the barrier fair and square. Got the lane pressure. So this is very interesting routing. Essentially, we can just go back. I mean, we didn't get the flash top lane, so it's a little bit awkward. But usually what I do in this situation is just control the topside scuttle because we have no control in bot lane. So even though we got, what's it called? We got a kill on the Vladimir. Wait a second. So Vladimir, in the meanwhile, just as I'm looking away from this lane, Vladimir goes in here and boom. Interesting combo. Alright, you did it. Nice. Good job. Nice. Well played. That's just a consequence of that gank combined with Destiny going in for a nice little combo there. Yeah, as it should be. Nice. Okay, so this is a really dangerous scenario. This is where you don't base, even though you have TP. Okay, never mind, you have TP. Never mind. My bad. Let's keep looking. Doesn't matter in that case. The art of backing is greatly diminished if you have TP up. And it's early on, so you don't need to save it. You can just use it. Alright. So, what I was talking about earlier is them not, like, they should not be hard shoving, because they don't get anything out of that, unless they can use immediate priority, and that's why they want to do it. In this kind of case, it's like, you can see them under turret here. You want to kite this towards, like, away from the Rek'Sai towards your own jungle here, so you want to keep it stuck over here, in this area. Alright, this is a little bit of execution again, though. A lot of this is based on execution. Strategies here are fine. I would have probably committed to the topside scuttle immediately. But again, that's just a little bit of an assessment based on the situation. Can you get the bottom one? Well, not if the Karma and Caitlyn decide to take up on their priority. We do not... This is an interesting situation. Just look at the game state here. So Wavy is going immediately for the topside scuttle. We see this guy coming over here. Pickles Man gonna be queuing here, I hope. No. So we need to queue here because the distance between, like, essentially you want to make sure you sandwich the Rek'Sai by jumping on top of him. If you don't sandwich the Rek'Sai, then he just jumps on Nautilus and then he's the one being sandwiched. Right now you see blue, like red, blue, right? And Nautilus is gonna get sandwiched, or Rek'Sai. And they both have gap closers, but Nautilus's gap closer cancels Rek'Sai's one, right? So if Nautilus queues, like you can, essentially you need to realize if you're already in range, you don't need to walk around the terrain, you can just walk, if you dot the line between Rek'Sai and the terrain, right, you can just walk straight to that line if that is already in range. And the more you need to walk towards a point on that line that's in range, the more you just directly move command onto there. You can just always do that. Since it's not a racing game, you have instant turning rates, right? So you don't need to make little curves. You just click onto that point. And that will work just fine here. This does not work as fine. And here you can see, at this point you can stop trying to fight and start disengaging, because there's no way that you're gonna bust through half a health bar. Reevaluation is a really important thing. You should be winning that fight. Maybe calculate which ability should be used by everyone. And then if it doesn't happen, you can call it out. If it still doesn't happen, you start reevaluating, saying, oh my goodness, we're not gonna win it without it. Kind of want to figure out the condition that makes your setup work. Because in this case, you should have won the 2v2, right? You have more power, but it comes from the Nautilus engage from the queue, right? Alright, so this is more micro-oriented. I really like your strategy. I really like how you're following through on the plans. It's just a little bit of micro. And again, that's fine. I mean, that doesn't worry me as a coach, right? What worries me if I draft a plan up and it just doesn't really get followed through, that makes me go, should I be clearer next time? Or what's going on? But this one, completely fine. Okay, so this is a good example. This is what I call, essentially, after every single slow push, you should be aiming to consume it and achieve something on the map. Even if that's just going into Fog of War. And in this case, you do have a pink ward, so you can gain control over an important part of whatever you want it to be, really. Whichever important part you think is most important to get control over, you can get it there. So what you could do is you could put it in this brush and still get vision, like right towards here, right? If someone takes a normal route towards the river, for example, if they don't know you warded this, then they don't know how to dodge it, right? It's very uncommon. So even if you put it in the pixel brush over here, that would still be fine. You already have a ward over here. Shallow wards, that's one topic I'll mention soon. Shallow wards are going to be completely forbidden. If you want a shallow ward against, if you're going to notice a Rek'Sai over here, it's debatable where they're going to live anyway. It's not really worth the ward. It's better if the entire team knows where Rek'Sai is well before the gank happens and can just play and adapt. Because your wave management is already going to be screwed over if you notice him here as well. So like if you're slow pushing and then you see him, well, you're gonna lose waves, and she's gonna freeze on you. That's gonna be a horrible situation. Alright, so that's just a little bit of context behind wave management, behind ward setups in conjunction with wave management. None of these aspects are individually very complicated, but if you put them together, you get for quite a nasty video game, don't you? Alright, so in the meanwhile, look at mid lane. We see Karma roaming for a little bit, getting a pink ward. This is one of those wards that I don't really like if it's on this side. I don't really like it either way. It's good with champions like Zac that can sit in this brush and then set up the gank. But it's not good if you're Rek'Sai and you don't want to come through the center of the lane like this. You want to get behind someone, like on this little ledge over here. That's where you want to be, right? Because it does take a little bit of time to reach the center of the lane. This is not the best angle. It really isn't. If someone's over here, for example, and you're over here, you're not gonna make it. They're gonna be by the turret at the turret by that point. Alrighty, so it's part 2. Part 2 of live analysis. Am I still going live? I'm not. I said I was doing a live analysis this time around. So, which means more play-by-play. Let's focus on bot lane for a second. So, bot lane coming after the Karma. Do they know where Xi is? If your enemies are making mistakes and overstepping, you should be assuming that there's a reason for it, right? And in this elo, that's not always going to be the case. You might just face someone who randomly misstep. But the higher you go, the more often you'll face people who do that because they're baiting or because they're planning something. In this case, Rek'Sai just straight up ignores bot lane. I think that's a huge mistake. This would have been an ideal time for Rek'Sai to be bot lane. Like, if you look at this state of the lane, right? You're not really slow pushing. You're not really trying to clear out the wave, which means they could just freeze, which they don't, because I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't really have an answer to that. Like, they should just keep the wave stationary there, and eventually it's gonna slow push, but it's gonna be very, very slow push, which is good, because you have a huge wave. You can evade the blue buff. Rek'Sai should be onto the bot lane, onto the enemy blue buff. Has no business in top lane right now. That flash is not gonna save him, I think. Just looking at that from the minimap. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just looking at it from here. I'm like, well, that's Rek'Sai's just gonna run him down with R. But apparently Rek'Sai never got anything on him. Fair enough. Alright, so Xin Zhao going bot lane. If we remember, like, Orianna was really nice if we ganked him. Vladimir standing in base, gonna TP onto a couple of minions, that's fine. Okay, so here's an interesting situation, right? So here's a situation in which you're essentially, look at this. So you're slowing down the push, right? By auto-attacking these minions. And by throwing a Q, like, okay, not on the minions, but okay, you're chunking out the minions. You're gonna press a Q when it has quarter health. That slows down the push, and you should only slow down a push if it's going to help you get control or if it helps you set up a gank. But you shouldn't be slowing down the push if they have unconditional priority, right? If they just unconditionally win and they unconditionally can just zone you guys off of the wave, then the more you counteract the shove, counteract the push, the longer they get to deny you and the bigger their time buffer will be, the extra amount of time they have before the next wave comes in and dies, right? They'll just have a huge wave under your turret, and they can back on that. They can go into Xin Zhao's blue buff if it was earlier, right? Which they didn't do, but it should have. So that's where you can build those advantages up. And for example, Karma here should not be trading, right? Rek'Sai should be setting up a dive on this bot lane when these waves crash, and we want to kind of keep control over it against that. But Rek'Sai's not going for that, which is silliness. He should just be going Krugs, Raptors, or Raptors, Krugs into bot lane dive. And if you want them to be top side, he should still be taking red Krugs, Krugs, Raptors first, and then going top lane directly. And if top lane appears hard to gank, just go get the Herald. This is very kill-oriented gameplay, very strange setup when you can just go directly. Not very efficient here. So I really disagree with this setup. It's a good gank on a slow push though, but it shouldn't have been such an elaborate, strange setup with like no farm, no nothing. This is when you go into Krugs, this is when you go into Raptors, this is when you go into Herald after that, unless there's something to do in mid lane. Should be no situation here in which you see a movement command targeted in this direction, because there's resources up. And you can read that if you read CS, right? You can see, even if you just took a guess, 40 at 10 minutes or 11 minutes, whew, probably has his camps up, right? It's a Xin Zhao, probably has his camps up. So again, that's just, even if you just had to take a guess, actually changes his pathing. Am I giving him sort of signal here or something? He really changed his direction. Interesting. Okay. That's not how you do it. Should be back to Barrowed state if you can't catch on to him. Anyway. Okay, so the idea here... What's the idea here? We're gonna chase after the Ornn with Magath having no items at all and being 3 levels down. That's interesting. So if you're 0-1 and 0, like if you're 0-1 and 0 at this point, you need to realize you've almost lost the game. So you might as well just farm up and try and stall it out, because any situation with people roaming across the map is going to end up with you dead. That would be... The goal is, the game plan is to win the game before 10 minutes. And with win, I don't mean 12 kills, but I do mean 3 or 4 takedowns would be average. So let's say in Platinum, my average is like 3.5 on Xin Zhao. And then as you climb higher, it's going to drop and drop and drop, and eventually it's going to be hard to get even 2 takedowns. But it would be very exceptional that you can't camp a lane and get kills somewhere. People would need to play extremely conservatively, like Korean pro level play kind of conservative. Like, it just doesn't really happen. And yeah, those guys go ham, but it's calculated hamness, you know what I mean? You know what I mean. So anyway... Okay, so we're gonna look back onto this. It's not gonna be live anymore, haha. Well, it wasn't live for a while now, but I'm gonna look back on this and actually analyze what happens, right? So, since now, first of all, we start out with a gank that is not set up properly. If you just ask yourself, is it easier to come in from this angle, right? Or from this angle? You just ask yourself, how do I get closest towards his escape path before he starts running away? Before he knows I'm there, right? So his escape path is directly behind him. He can line himself up with the turret and his threat so that he can walk directly away from you and directly towards his turret. That's the optimal positioning for an Ornn player. Alright, there's no extra discrepancies. Maybe like Nautilus Q if he went that, but, you know, staying behind the minions. But that's not going to be a big deal. So... in that case, you want to be closest to this point, essentially, directly behind the Ornn. Let's say if you need to reach him for a little bit and walk a few seconds, it's going to be somewhere about here. You need to be able to reach this point when you show up within 2 seconds, or this point within 3 seconds, or this point within 4 seconds, right? He's going to be walking away every second. So, when this happens, right, when Power Fruit, look at this. Wait, they warded that? Didn't we know about that ward? Okay, so why didn't we start at a red buff? I didn't look at this invade, but why didn't we start at a red buff? Huh. They have Karma Caitlyn. There's no way they can enter that. We have control. Huh. Interesting. So we went for a really weird setup, which means we don't know where the wards are, but in that setup, the question is, can we invade? Can we get their jungle? Yeah, we can. And then you can go for, let's say, level 2 bot lane gank, but that wasn't really the plan, so the invade really wasn't part of the plan either. I didn't call anything out because I just assumed we'd go for a standard setup. Nothing weird. But yeah, even with that being given, we should still go from here, and then if this guy doesn't appear gankable, you're already in river, and you're still in fog of war after you went missing on your camp, right? And then you can go into this, and if you know that, for example, Rek'Sai started topside, that's really, really strange, but this is some very interesting routing here. He's wasting like 5 seconds, but never mind that. It's a very clean route, very clean route. This is one of the cleanest routes I've ever seen in Valence League. Like, it's one of the cleanest routes I've ever seen below Diamond, I would say, in my life. Like, going red wolves into enemy blue buff like that, or sorry, blue wolves into enemy blue buff like that, requires some good insight on where the Xin Zhao is and how you cut him off and get his stuff. That's not bad at all. His only mistake is leaving. His only mistake is leaving. He should not be leaving. You should just keep going. You have a smite. Since Zhao doesn't have a smite, he would not be able to survive this jungle. Alright, so part 3. So, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of ground we covered. So, a lot of specific tactics. Instead of, like, overviewing, like, oh, game planning. You know, this has been a lot of, specifically, if you ever find yourself, let's say you got a group, but let me find an analogy. Let's see, so, if you ever find yourself in enemy territory, behind enemy lines, right, then eventually there's always a choice to be made. Can you make it back? And in this case, the question is, like, what does the enemy lines have that makes them stronger and more powerful? I can't answer that question for you. I don't know why they would be stronger. Like, what's the point? Like, essentially, you can just get the red buff, right? That would have been no problemo. I can't answer that question. I guess it's like, yeah, I find it hard to state why that enemy would have an advantage in their own jungle. I guess you have to walk through a choke here. That's kind of a map design thing. You have to walk through a choke here, and they don't. They have open terrain, which is an advantage to you guys with open terrain. Always, right? Always. Defending, like, this is essentially, they have control over the choke that lies ahead of them. That's essentially how you should view it. So let's say if Caitlyn shouldn't start abilities and then should start lining up traps through the choke. We can't do that if we had a Caitlyn. We can't do that. We can't line up a luck snare. We can't line up anything. So essentially, you could say the defender's advantage lies in the map design, right? So you can say the same thing here, right? You come into this big open space here towards a choke point. That's how the map has been designed. And are we going to see the same pattern over here? What happens if you invade the blue buff? It's a little bit more obscure. You don't see the same pattern as clearly. What happens when they invade the blue buff over here? They have to walk through this choke. This is an open space, right? This is where you can kite. This is where you can kite again. So you kind of have these two open spaces here. And then you have a choke over here. And you get caught off, right? You can't keep walking in this direction. So like here you can move in all directions, essentially. And here again, you can move in all directions. You can't move into one specific bump over here, but you can move all the way over here. So it's kind of a map design thing. Alright. But yeah, that's not sufficient in this case. We could have easily gotten it. Here you want to make sure you kite it to over here. I already went over that. Just find it. It's just like a puzzle, right? Find the ideal space for something to be in. Like, where are the threats coming from? The threats are coming from here and from here, right? So you want to keep it in the middle, right? If it's only from this direction, kite it to one side. If it's only from this direction, kite it to the other side. You see how it works, right? That's, alright. This is absolute craziness. What is he doing here? What is he doing? What? Why is this guy clearing this? Why is this guy killing minions? You have him in the freeze, and you have Rek'Sai topside. Why would you be clearing minions? Makes no sense. Also, the Krugs and Raptors are worth 100 billion trillion times. This should have been the end of the game, where he just goes Raptors into Krugs, and instead he goes for Scuttle. Like, that's the holy grail of jungling. That's what I call rigidity. Right, being stuck in a certain pattern or mindset based on what's usually the case. Usually, Scuttle is the most achievable because you come from your jungle and you have a little bit of control in the rivers. No control beyond that. Right now, you have absolute dominance and control over the entire map, all the way up to this brush, right? So there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't invade Raptors and Krugs at all. In fact, it's silly. It's silly that he didn't. Xin Zhao needs to make his first ganks work, otherwise the game's going to be an uphill struggle. If you make those first ganks work, you can snowball the entire game from that. It's essentially, this is the kind of game that's mostly over at the 5-minute mark. Like here, Rek'Sai should have never pathed over here. He should be on those Krugs, and then onto the Raptors. I'm so adamant about this. And Xin Zhao essentially should commit to a buff that he can guard, that he has control over. He knows where the wards are. There's someone who sits in the brush. There's someone who clears the red buff. and then you just go from there, right? You make sure you keep that vision control. You make sure that gank is blind for the enemy jungler, for the enemy laners, right? You really have to make sure that they can't reach any deeper than your raptors. If they do, then you should be invading as well. And then you just follow through on the invade and seal their red buff, right? And that's when you can go for level 2 gank setup in mid or bot lane and transition from there. Maybe you can shadow the mid lane through raptors. That's not a game plan that I would go for, but it's possible. I said game plan, but you know what I mean. Okay, so this is what I really like. So you go do the wolves, right? Because honestly, at this point, this is when you can still keep spamming ganks. But I understand that you want to catch up on levels. That's very understandable. Very understandable indeed. This is when Vladimir doesn't want to push this, right? Unless Vladimir wants to base here, which I don't think he does. He has 600 gold. So Vladimir doesn't need to push this. You're handing the Orianna an extra wave before she bases, right? So unless you wanted to dive this, which you can't because Wavy can tail the lane, right? That means you're giving her all this CS, right? This is silly because now she just got the minions to a point where she can't CS any of them. Look at that. Makes no sense. And here Destiny surely kites back against a like 5-stack Conqueror Rek'Sai. No. Nope. Okay. So Xin Zhao's over here, 5-stack Rek'Sai over here. That would have been a good case to just keep kiting. And then off of that kiting and the control you get in mid lane, you can start getting Raptors and Krugs with Xin Zhao. And just, you know, finish your priority here, like finish the push here and use up your priority by basing and making her miss a wave. Okay. Alright, let's just jump forwards here. I don't think the game's gonna bring anything good for us. Alright, well, that's it for this one, guys.